A simple analogy, if you've ever told your kids, hey, go clean your room, and then you go check on them, you're going to find the couple of things they did wrong because that's what you're looking for. The same thing was true with us at school. We were just looking for what people were doing wrong.
Welcome to Innovating Education, the podcast where we engage in solution-driven conversations to transform the educational landscape. I'm your host, Dr. Riley Williams, and today we have an absolutely phenomenal guest who is redefining what it means to lead in education. Dr. Darrin Peppard is a dynamic educational leader, keynote speaker, author, and consultant dedicated to empowering school leaders and transforming school culture. With over 26 years in public education, Dr. Peppard has served as a classroom teacher, coach, assistant principal, high school principal, and superintendent. Now, as the founder and CEO of Road to Awesome, he works with educators and organizations across North America to develop positive school culture, strong leadership, and student-oriented learning environments. During his tenure as a high school principal, Dr. Peppard led a profound cultural shift, moving from a punitive, compliance-based model to one that recognized and reinforced positive behavior, empowered educators, and engaged students in meaningful leadership opportunities. This transformational leadership approach became the foundation for his book, Road to Awesome, The Journey of a Leader, where he shares actionable strategies for fostering thriving, engaged school communities. Through Road to Awesome, Dr. Peppard provides keynote speeches, leadership coaching, and consulting services designed to help schools and districts enhance school culture, leadership effectiveness, and teacher retention. He is also the host of Leaning into Leadership podcast, where he explores transformational leadership, student empowerment, and professional growth. Today, we're diving deep into what truly takes to build a thriving school culture, empower students and educators, and lead with intention. Dr. Peppard, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much, Riley. I appreciate you having me on. I appreciate that introduction, and I'm definitely looking forward to the conversation.
Well, I'd like to start at the beginning. You've had such an incredible journey in education, from teacher to superintendent, now to leadership coach. Can you walk us through your path? What inspired you to take this road, and what pivotal moments shaped your philosophy on leadership?
Yeah, it's I'll start by saying it's dangerous to ask a podcast host to tell their story because I could just go and go, but I'll try and be brief. I will tell you, I'm a Central Wyoming kid. When I went off to college, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I was one of those kids that I was engaged in school, but not really heavily engaged. And when I graduated from high school, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And I looked back on my time as a high school athlete and thought, our high school trainer has a pretty cool job. Maybe I'll do that. And I started actually as a physical therapy major. And my, let's just say things didn't go great. My first couple semesters in college, I was a really good pool player because I was in the pool hall all the time and not in the classroom. And so, long story short, there came across a wonderful opportunity. A friend of mine asked me to come help him coach a fifth grade girls basketball team, and I was hooked. And that actually is what led me into education. Started my teaching career in Northwest Arizona. I was a middle school teacher, high school teacher, eventually became a head basketball coach, achieved a lot of the things that I really felt like I wanted to do. And along the way, I had an amazing principal who tapped me on the shoulder and said, you need to think about leadership. That's a role that I see you in. And that led me to the, assistant principal role, and ultimately to the superintendency. And, you ask about some of those pivotal moments, right? Or some of those things that shaped the journey. My first year as an assistant principal, I was in charge of all discipline and attendance for a high school of about 1,100 students. So a very thankless job, and one that had to be pretty much anchored to the desk because it was nonstop cookie cutter discipline. And I don't think we realized it, but we were very much living in a culture of compliance. We were focused on all the things people were doing wrong, not focused on the things people were doing right. In a staff meeting, and this is kind of the core of my first book, Road to Awesome, in a staff meeting, somebody just asked the question. They're like, why does it always have to be about what they do wrong? Why can't it be about what they do right? And for me, that was I refer to that as a two roads diverged moment, kind of a Robert Frost moment for me, where I could keep showing up and being the one to just catch people doing things wrong, or maybe I show up a little bit differently. And that really kind of started the change in our culture. I learned in that time that I have very little control over anything other than myself. And so if I started showing up a little bit differently, maybe others would start showing up a little bit differently. That, of course, then led to me being the high school principal, a job I still to this day, I loved it so very much. I identify as a recovering high school principal. That'll be a job that will always be deep in my heart. And then I fell in love with coaching leaders as a principal. I had a leadership coach myself, loved coaching my aspiring leaders, my assistant principals, department heads, that type of thing. So I chased a superintendent job and I thought, hey, this will give me a chance to coach more leaders, which could not be further from the truth. Superintendents literally don't have that kind of time. And in fact, I hired leadership coaches for all of my principals. So after 4 years as a superintendent, my book had been out. I'd had some success with the speaking and decided to just do that full time. So for the last about 3.5 years, I have been speaking all over North America, working with school districts all over the United States, just helping leaders get real clear and really be intentional with their time and their actions and their communications, and ultimately helping them, which ultimately helps teachers and students to just walk in their purpose. So that's about as short of the version of the story, I think, as I can tell.
Well, I'd like to take a little bit of a step back. You talked about a moment in your career when you realized you had to shift from a punitive, compliance based leadership model to one that focuses on recognition, relationships, and a positive culture. Can you share that story with us? And then
Mhm.
what led to that aha moment, and how did that change the way that you led?
Yeah, so it is that two roads moment for me, but I'll go a little deeper into that story. The staff meeting that we were in, we were trying to solve what we thought were the two biggest issues in education. And in this staff meeting, we were going to solve what we were going to do about hats and what we were going to do about cell phones. That's what we saw as the two biggest issues. And, I tell this story all the time, and people laugh. And they laugh, but it's an uncomfortable laugh because they've all sat in that staff meeting. And in many cases, they're still sitting in that staff meeting. And I think for us, it was just this incredible revelation that, I mean, I could take you to that school today and stand in the exact spot I was standing when those questions were asked. I will never forget it. It is indelibly printed in my brain because it was this real big wake up moment. And I could see it across the entire room, though. I mean, Riley, it wasn't just me. 95% of the people in the room, you could just see them kind of pause. I mean, you've been in those staff meetings, right? I mean, it's especially in that kind of a staff meeting, it's mayhem. And boy, when those two questions were asked, it was, you could hear a pin drop because everybody was like, oh my gosh, is that really who we are? Is it really what we want to be about? And I think it was great because it really shook us to our core and it forced us to take a step back and say, all right, what do we really want to be about? What do we really want our kids to think about us and to say about us when they go home and they're sitting at the dinner table? What do we want our kids to say about us? And, the way we are leading right now, we don't want them to talk about that. Honestly, I'm embarrassed about it. I mean, I talk about it all the time. So it's almost like it's therapy for me that I talk about it all the time, but I'm not proud of who I was back at that time because we really did just focus on all the things that were wrong. And the interesting thing was I did 2,200 discipline referrals that year, 1,100 kids, 2,200 discipline referrals. And that seems like a huge number, and it is, but only 4% of our students had 2 or more discipline referrals. We were spending all of our time on 4% of our kids. 96% of our kids were doing amazing things, but we weren't looking for that. And so it became this, we have to change our mindset. We have to think about what it is we're looking for every day. A simple analogy if you've ever told your kids, hey, go clean your room, and then you go check on them, you're going to find the couple of things they did wrong because that's what you're looking for. The same thing was true with us at school. We were just looking for what people were doing wrong. What if we start looking for the things they're doing right? And when we see it, recognize it, reward it, and reinforce it. And by shifting to that focus, and it didn't happen overnight. It took work. It took being intentional. I mean, you're talking about completely shifting every person's mindset to think about, hey, what are the things I want to see? And then when I see them, how do I recognize, reward, and reinforce it? And that it was an incredible shift. But over time, we went from really poor attendance to really strong attendance. We went from a poor graduation rate to a super strong graduation rate. We wanted to see happening in our school happen. Now, we still have discipline referrals. Let's not be naive, right? But I think we went from 2,200 down about 2 years later to around 500. So just a significant drop. And I tell people all the time, and I know we talked about it in our school, if we don't like the culture where we are, maybe we ought to think about changing the way we lead it. And that's in the classroom. Teachers, if you don't like the culture in your classroom, think about changing the way you lead it. Bus drivers, you don't like the culture on your bus, think about the way you lead it. And obviously that goes for school administrators. So I think that was a big piece for us, was just, we got to show up a little differently. We got to think about what we're really looking for. And then, man, when we see what we're looking for, really drive it home.
I love how you said, instead of trying to catch people doing things wrong, we need to catch them doing things right. That is a game-changing mindset shift. Now, can we talk just a little bit more how our school leaders can work to improve that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it starts with just getting real clear. For me, I think in leadership, there's two real key things. Number one, you got to be really clear. And number two, you got to be really intentional. So I think as a school leader, just from my own perspective, I needed to know, what is it I really want to see? What is it that I really value? What is it that really is important to me as a school leader? And once we get really clear about that, and we did this as like a collective exercise as a staff, what do we really want to see from our kids? We talk all the time about, all those cool words that go into mission statements and vision statements and that kind of stuff. But, we want to see kids who are genuinely engaged in their learning. We want to see kids who are modeling great citizenship. We want to see kids who are demonstrating that empathetic and caring manner, right? We want to see everybody celebrating growth and improvement. So if those are the things we want, and whatever it is in your world, in your school that you're focused on, that's what you need to lean into. For us, our attendance was atrocious. We were at about 84% average daily attendance. And that's where we started. Let's fix the attendance, right? So let's lean into that. Let's set a goal. And every kid who is meeting or exceeding our goal, let's recognize them. Let's celebrate them. And we didn't shoot for the stars right away. It was, hey, what if we can get to 88% this year? It's just in this first year, a 4% growth in that attendance rate for us would put about 30,000 hours back into the classroom. That was huge. We made sure everybody knew this is what we're looking for. And we celebrated kids who were meeting and exceeding that goal, not just celebrating perfect attendance. That can be demoralizing. Here's the goal, meet or exceed. Let's celebrate that. And then we started doing it with academics. We started doing it with positive referrals. We started doing it with, you name it. And the more clear you are about what you really care about and what you really value, two things happen. Number one, you start to see it more. When you know, hey, this is what I'm looking for, guess what? You see it. I drive a Jeep. I'll give you a real quick example of that for people who don't believe me. I drive a Jeep, and anybody who drives a Jeep knows when you see another Jeep driver, you throw them the Jeep wave. Yeah, absolutely. Riley and I are Jeep waving for those of you who are listening. Riley, before I bought my Jeep, I never saw Jeeps. Now, literally, I see them everywhere because I'm looking for them, right? Look for the things you want to see. Guess what? You're going to find it. And then recognize, reward, and reinforce the heck out of it. So that's what I would tell them. I tell administrators that all the time. This is what we have to do. Get clear, be intentional.
Can you explain what a positive referral is?
Yeah, absolutely. So we all know what a negative discipline referral is, right? Kid did this in the classroom, whatever. Send him to the office, here, administrator, this kid's broke, fix him. We decided to turn that on its ear a little bit. And at a high school level, a lot of times people will say PBIS doesn't work at the high school level. I will tell you that's an incorrect statement. It's all about how you frame it and how you structure it. So we actually called it the Road to Awesome card. Our whole school, we branded Road to Awesome. We were traveling the Road to Awesome. Everybody's on their own Road to Awesome. Man, it caught fire. And we created what we called the Road to Awesome positive referral. And what this referral is just, it looks a lot like a discipline referral. And a teacher fills it out because they caught a kid doing something right. And we call them into the office. It's like, oh my gosh, I got called to the office. But it's, hey, you know what? Here's something awesome that you did. We're really proud of you. We want to call your parents and just say, hey, we saw this kid doing whatever, helping somebody out or holding the door for somebody or doing great in the classroom when maybe, it's a student who'd been struggling in the classroom, those types of things. We always took ours a step further. The Road to Awesome cards every month, every student who had received a Road to Awesome card got an invitation to our Road to Awesome barbecue. We did a barbecue during the school day once a month to recognize, reward, reinforce all of those kids. And it was amazing. That thing actually took off. We started having positive referrals, students writing positive referrals for students. We had students writing positive referrals for teachers. I mean, it was amazing how this thing grew. And again, what you're looking for, you find. And when you start to model that, when you start to model looking for the great things, more and more people want to talk about the great things. And it made it a lot easier too. I'll tell you this as a side note, it made it so much easier to control the narrative of our school. When all we were dealing with was negatives, oh, that's a terrible school. That's a bad school. All of a sudden, we are telling all the positive stories. The view of our school really, really got reshaped in our community. People are like, oh, no, that's a great school right there.
So one of the biggest messages that you have is that culture and climate are everything in a school. How do you define school culture, and what are the biggest signs that a school has a positive or toxic culture?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. I think there's so many different definitions that you can have for culture, but I would simply say this. The culture of a school is how we do things, what we do, why we do them, and how people feel about what we're doing in our school. It's the traditions, it's the routines, it's our regular practices, and it's also where we choose to put our focus. Are we really leaning heavily into teaching and learning? Are we focused more on academics or rather athletics and extracurricular activities? Are we focused holistically on everything? Your school culture essentially is just the vibe of your school. I ask that question all the time. I love that you ask that. When I speak about culture with schools, I love to put that question out and have people just kind of talk about that at the table. And I think the last 5 times that I've done this here in just the last month or so, each time I've heard that phrase. It's the vibe of your school. And I love that. And I think when you think about a positive culture versus a more negative culture, a more toxic culture, I think there's a feeling in the school. I remember a couple of my vendors that would come into my high school when our culture was really healthy, really strong. I remember one in particular, my Scholastic rep, his name is Rick, and Rick would just say, Darrin, I walk in the front door and there's just a different level of energy in this school. I just feel it. And I think there's a lot to be said for pouring into that positive energy and focusing on the good things that are happening. I mean, it just causes us to vibrate at a different frequency. Negative cultures, what I see there are frequently maybe staff members who don't necessarily want to support each other as much, or possibly staff members who just close their door and just kind of retreat into their own space. I work with a lot of schools right now, Riley, that are on maybe their fourth principal in 3 years, or their fifth superintendent in 5 years, or something like that. What tends to happen, and here's why, kind of a side note there, here's why I think many cultures become a little bit negative or a little bit toxic. It's because of a lot of turnover or a lot of lack of clear focus, lack of clear direction. And in the case of those schools where, fourth principal in 3 years or whatever the case may be, a lot of staff members tend to just kind of retreat. They just kind of pull back and they just close their door. And it's like, I'm just going to focus on just me and my kids. That's what I'm going to focus on. And it doesn't have that community feel, that collective efficacy that we want to see and feel with our staff. With those real positive cultures, I think that's where you do see staff members who really are enjoying what they do, who interact in real positive ways with students, who have, school leaders that have real clear direction, are very supportive. They're the ones who are visible in the building. They're not trying to lead from their office. There's so many different pieces that I think go into it, but ultimately, clear leadership and that consistency. The more that you have people who remain in positions for an extended period of time, school leaders in particular, I think the more people tend to have a little bit more of that positive feeling, that sense of community within the school. And unfortunately, in some of those more negative environments or more toxic environments, certainly turnover can play a role, but also a lack of focus on the right things. I think schools who focus only on test scores tend to have a little bit more of that type of a culture, because we're not focused on the people, we're focused just on the data. So that's another one I can go for hours on that particular one.
Well, what would you say the first step is for a leader who would like to shift, let's say, first of all, from a negative, toxic culture into a more positive, empowering engagement?
Sure, absolutely. Well, I think the first step is just admitting it to yourself, being willing to look at your culture and say, whew, man, we got a problem. And for some people, maybe it's that, that struck by lightning moment like I had where, hey, why is it always got to be about what they do wrong? I didn't realize we were doing that. For some, it's just, hey, I need to take a little step back and really assess what do we have going on here. For me, I had a place that I would check in with myself on a regular basis on my campus, and it wasn't in my office. And I think it's important that this space isn't in your office, but I was a basketball coach. I mentioned that earlier. I loved watching game film. Heck, we videoed practice. I love watching practice video because you can see from up above, what is it we're really doing? And the tape doesn't lie. And I would always then just go stand on the balcony of our gymnasium as the principal. And in my mind's eye, I would just put on the floor the things that were important to me. I had 6 things that were really important to me as a school leader, and I would just put them on the floor. Okay, how am I doing here? What are we really doing here? So I would advise leaders as the first step, go stand on the balcony or wherever that space may be for you, and really take a hard look at what are we doing? What does our culture look like? And then really dig in to listening to the people around you. Ask questions of your students. Ask questions of your staff. I have a good friend who's a high school principal in San Antonio, Texas, Todd Bloomer. And Todd does a listening tour on a regular basis at his high school there in San Antonio. And I think he has 2,800, 2,900 kids on his campus, 9 buildings on his campus, huge high school. But Todd meets with every single one of his teachers a couple of times a year and just has 3 questions. He gives them the questions in advance, goes and sits down with each and every one of them and just tell me how we're doing here. Tell me how we're doing here. Because we can't assume just from our own perspective that we see it all. So I think it's really important to gather that information, talk to parents, talk to visitors. I had my staff one time walk our building, our main entry hallway. I met them at the front door on a professional development day. Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're just going to walk this hallway. I want you to walk it as if you're a visitor, not somebody who comes in the door every day. And tell me, what story are we telling about our school? What do we value based on what's in this hallway? And it was so eye-opening for them. So I think just really taking an assessment of where are we and where do we really want to go? And then from there, that's when you get into the clarity and the intentionality piece. Get clear about what matters to you and then start being intentional to do work to match up to that.
So we're getting on the balcony, right? How do we build this into a habit? Like, say, having coffee on the balcony. How are we going to build that into our routine?
I put it on the calendar. I put it on the calendar regularly. And I'll just tell you a real quick aside on this one, a real quick story. The very first time I did this balcony level leadership thing, I knew, and this was from working with my coach. He told me, find a place where you can reflect. Again, I was a coach. It was a natural space for me. Well, the balcony happened to be a walkway also. And that walkway went from the main hallway to the pool. Well, we had students who had class in the pool, right? And I'm over on the balcony. I'm deep into, here's my 6 things on the floor. And Riley, I like to talk to myself. Like when I drive, man, I have so many great conversations with the windshield. I was kind of doing that. And I think some of my students thought I'd lost it because a little while later, my secretary showed up and she's like, Darrin, what are you doing? And I explained to her, I'm like, this is what I'm doing. And she's like, okay, I think it's awesome. I love it. And I started to just share with people, this is what I'm doing when I'm doing that. Reflection's such a powerful tool and we don't do it enough. And as leaders, I think we have to be so intentional to set that time aside. And so I started putting it on my calendar. My secretary actually had full access to my calendar, full access to my email, all of that kind of stuff. There were times balcony would show up on my calendar and I didn't put it there because she put it there. Having somebody else to hold you accountable is just as important. So that's what I think. Get it on the calendar, be real intentional with it, set 20 minutes aside. It doesn't take long to go and reflect. But I think if you do that, it's huge. I started using a planner. This is just another way. This isn't the balcony, but another way to reflect. I started using a planner that I would create for my entire week. I'm so far from type A, it's not funny. So if I don't put something on my calendar, it will not happen. And I created this weekly planner where I would lay out my week, make sure I had, the time that, hey, I'm going to block this time where nobody has access to me, to get that really high leverage work done, my balcony time. But then I also had little reflection for each day, just, hey, what went well, what didn't go well, and then also some reflection for the week. And I actually have that planner available on my website. I'll give you a link. It's a free download. People can have it if they'd like to try that. But I think it makes a big difference to just set the time aside. If you're not intentional with your time, somebody else owns your time. So that's how I think, getting on the balcony is for me, that's the only way getting on the balcony would happen.
And you don't just work as far as with the culture with your students, you're also working with your teachers. And as a coach, you advocate for a coach-based approach to teacher development rather than punitive evaluation systems. What does effective instructional coaching look like, and how can schools implement that successfully?
Man, that is such an awesome question. I actually just finished reading Principal Kafele, Baruti Kafele's newest book. In fact, it's sitting right here. What is my value instructionally to teachers I supervise? I love this book. I love Principal Kafele, but In this book, he hits it so very well. So I'm going to use that to launch into what I want to talk about. In the book, he opens with a story. It's Friday night, September, high school football stadium. The team's fired up. The coaches have got the kids ready to go. Let's go. They go charging out on the field, and the coaches say, "Good luck tonight, guys. We'll be in here in the locker room if you need us." That's absurd. Nobody would ever do that, right? Coaches are going to be right in the middle of the action, right there. You got some up in the press box. You got some right down there on the field. Why wouldn't we do that as school leaders? Why would we just tell our teachers, hey, you got what you need. I'll be in the office if you need me. That makes no sense. To me, great instructional leaders, the people who are charged with leading instruction, are in the middle of the action. It was one of the first things I learned from my coach. When my coach first came and saw me, I was just running around being a firefighter. And he stopped me in the hall and just said, "Look, if you want to be a firefighter, be a firefighter. I'm going to go back to my school. If you want to be a leader, you need to get in the action. You've got to be in the classrooms. That's what you have to do." And boy, from that moment on, it hit me. We have to be in the action. But it's not enough to just be in the action. So often I'm in classrooms with school leaders that I'm working with or that I'm supporting. Just recently, one of my schools right here in the Omaha area, I was in with the principal and one of his brand new assistant principals. And this is something that happens common. Newer assistant principals think, well, I have to be able to tell this teacher what they're doing wrong. No, you don't. That's not what a coach does. I mean, occasionally as a coach, it's, hey, we got to quit doing this, right? But instead, it's suggest, it's encourage, it's help them grow. And you do that with a mindset of curiosity. I tell leaders all the time, just ask a lot of questions. Don't think you have to come in and solve whatever for teachers. You're going to have some teachers who maybe need a lot of support. Maybe they're really early in their career, or they struggle a little bit with relationship building, or maybe they're struggling a little bit in terms of what instructional strategies they should try. But a lot of times, it's your very best teachers who want the most feedback. Your very best teachers want as much as possible to grow. Most administrators are intimidated by that. Most administrators are like, I can't tell the calculus teacher how to teach calculus. But you don't have to. Just be curious. Ask good questions, because that launches into conversation. And when you have those conversations about pedagogy, especially with your very best teachers, that's being a coach. Sometimes what your teachers need most is a cheerleader. Be that for them. Unfortunately, I know that the evaluative systems and that kind of stuff, they exist for a reason. Most of them are really good. They just get used the wrong way. And if we really want to grow the people we have to coach them. I mean, in reality, I heard Todd Whitaker say this once. Actually, I probably heard Todd say this a dozen different times, but the first time I heard him say it, it hit me like a ton of bricks. When it comes to the personnel we have in our schools, if we don't like what we have two choices: go get better people or coach up the ones you have. Riley, they're not lining up at the door right now. You got to coach up the ones you have. And I think the more we can be there with them, ask a lot of good questions, lean in and provide support, heck, create systems where they can learn from each other. We did Ed Camp all the time, where our teachers were learning from each other. We created a peer-to-peer observation process where we weren't even involved in it. It was just simply the teachers going and watching each other teach. A friend of mine in North Carolina leads every Friday professional development led by the teachers. The administrator shows up occasionally. She's not taking attendance. She's there to learn. But Harold A. Winkler Middle School in Concord, North Carolina, every Friday, the Wolfpack workshop, they show up at 7 o'clock in the morning. Each teacher just takes turns sharing, hey, here's what's working in my classroom. And in their hallways, they talk about pedagogy all the time. when you create that coaching environment, when you create that, hey, we're here for each other and hey, what have you tried this or have you thought about this? Or tell me what you were trying to accomplish with that. Man, it completely changes how things work in a school.
I listen to this and I'm like, wow, this is how we show our teachers that they are valued, that they are supported, and that's how we empower them. I mean, that's wonderful,
Yep,
wonderful advice.
100%. I get a little passionate about it. Yeah, so as I'm sure you could tell.
Well, and you believe that students are actually ready to lead right now, not just someday. Can you share some real examples of student leadership initiatives that you've worked with?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, the thing about student leadership, and again, I was a high school principal, but I think we need to give our kids genuine opportunities. We talk all the time, or I hear people talk all the time about, we need these kids to be ready for life after high school. Well, why can't we help them be prepared for life in high school? To me, that just makes sense. And the more authentic leadership opportunities you can give kids, the better prepared they're going to be when they move on. A couple simple examples from the high school level. When I was a principal, and this actually happened prior to my time, but I think it's a brilliant thing, and I kept it going. We had a student who was part of the Chamber of Commerce board of directors. And not just like, oh, that's cute, they're on the board. No, they were a voting member of the board for the Chamber of Commerce, and they served a 2-year term. Just a great opportunity to get kids involved in our local businesses, to understand a little bit more about commerce, to understand a little bit more about how government works. And man, the students that we had serving on that board were amazing. Another one too, just any opportunity we can give students to genuinely share what they're passionate about and going and making a difference in their community. With our different career academies at the high school where I was principal, our seniors had to do some type of a senior project. And it had to be connected to the job shadowing that they had been doing with a field that they wanted to go into. And I had a young lady come to me, oh, it was probably my second year, I think, as principal. And she said, I saw this thing when I went to the student council convention. She said, we have a pretty high poverty level here in our community. She's like, I would like to create for my senior project something that I'd like to call the Giving Pack Project. And she wanted to adopt the elementary school that was at the bottom of the hill. Every Friday, we're going to fill backpacks with non-perishable goods and that kind of stuff for kids who don't have meals on the weekend. The young lady's name is Shelby. I'm like, Shelby, I think that's a great idea. A couple days later, I've got a bunch of dignitaries in the building and I'm giving them a tour. And we end up in the classroom where Shelby is, and she's pitching that idea to the Health Occupations Career Academy kids. By the time we left, she had more than enough funding to do what she needed to do. And I mean, it was a great project, but now that's probably 9 years ago. That project now serves every elementary kid in that entire community, 9 different elementary schools. Shelby graduated 8 years ago. That project has continued year after year after year. And just because this young lady came forward with a strong idea, leaders say yes, don't say no. And saying yes feels good. And it's amazing what happens when you give kids an opportunity. I'll give you one more real quick one. The more we can give kids opportunities to just be genuine. And this story actually is in my new book that's coming out right now, Culture First Classrooms. Had a senior, a high school senior, again, another project, but he wanted to create, he had been shadowing with some EMTs, and he wanted to create a mock DUI crash. A lot of schools do mock DUI crashes around prom time. That's great. Usually it's the fire department or, it's the Mothers Against Drunk Driving group or something like that. This came from a high school senior. Did the entire thing. It was absolutely amazing, so powerful. He's now actually an EMT in the Oklahoma City area, so right there, not too far from you. And just giving kids a chance to do something. I'll give you one more real quick middle school example. We had some middle schoolers when I was a superintendent. They wanted to add a vending machine in our hallway at the middle school. They came and they made a pitch to their assistant principal. He brought it to us. And instead of just saying yes or no, we told the kids. I mean, they met with myself, maintenance director, finance director, that kind of thing. Let's talk about what all goes into that. It isn't just as simple as, hey, let's order a vending machine. So we asked the kids, go and do your homework. Go really look into what's necessary. My nutrition services director was there. And she mentioned, hey, there's quite a few FDA regulations here that you have to be aware of. The kids did some unbelievable homework. They came back with 3 different pitches. They did research into the different vending machine companies. What were the guidelines they had to meet? What were the hours the machine could be on? There was nothing left to say but to say yes when they came back with this. 2 middle school girls. And when you give kids an opportunity, it's incredible what they'll do. You just got to give them opportunities. They're ready to lead now.
So can you tell me, what does an engagement-first education system look like?
That's what I just talked about right there, right? It's all about finding ways to connect what your kids care about, what your kids are passionate about, with the learning standards that we still have to meet. Every now and again, you'll hear people talk about this and they'll say, well, just learn what your kids want to learn about that year. Well, that's not exactly how it works, right? We have standards we have to meet, but that doesn't mean that we have to do them the way we want to do them. Sometimes just working with how students best learn, a lot of different learning styles, being flexible with how the room is set up so that maybe kids who struggle to sit still have opportunity to work that out, to shake the wiggles free, if you will, but still stay engaged in the learning opportunities. Sometimes it's about how we let students express what they have learned. I'm a huge advocate for project-based learning. I think it's one of the coolest things that we do when it's done right. And the big differentiator there, of course, is it's not, hey, we're going to do a project, you 4 work together, one kid does it all, everybody takes the same grade. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about genuine project-based learning where, you have some type of an entry event. This is what we're really specifically working on. Obviously, there's intentional teaching and learning along the way, but the student has an opportunity to demonstrate their learning in their own way. I'll give you an elementary school example for this one. When I was a superintendent, we went really heavy into project-based learning. I took a big group of teachers, went to a bunch of different project-based learning schools so they could really see and experience what it could look like. And one of the first groups that I had jump right in was my 3rd grade teaching team. They actually were working on geography standards, and it was U.S. geography. What they had previously done was each kid did a report about a city. Okay, it's pretty basic, right? I remember when I was in like 4th or 5th grade, I did a report on Pennsylvania, right? I don't know why I still know that, but I remember it. In this particular case, instead, each of the individual students became travel agents, and they were assigned one person in the community, and their job was to sell their city that they had drawn to the individual. And the amount of research that the kids put into this, the amount of writing, the amount of math, the amount of speaking and learning standards that they were hitting because they had to present to us, man, it was amazing. In addition to the geography that they learned. The young man I was matched up with, he was sending me on a trip to Detroit. And man, did he sell me on going to Detroit. Now, as it turned out later that year, I was in Detroit for a job fair, recruiting teachers. And I took a few pictures from Detroit just to bring back to him to show that, hey, I took my trip. I went to Detroit. And those are the types of things that kids remember. But it's also ways, in that particular case, there are a lot of different community members who were involved and that type of thing. And for kids to practice skills that matter. I mean, it's one thing for a kid to give a report on Detroit, but instead to present and sell me on Detroit and put together a travel package for me of hotel, and car rental and airline and all, I mean, the whole bit, right? Just there's a difference, and kids engage in a much different way when it isn't just, okay, learn this, regurgitate it on a test. So I think, again, I can give you a million examples here, but meeting kids where they are and giving them an opportunity to express themselves makes such a difference in how they own that learning, but then also how they retain that learning.
And you've spoken about how schools need to feel like home for students, where they're seen, heard, loved. How can schools strengthen their sense of community, not just for students, but teachers, family, and staff?
I think it begins by remembering what we're all about. Our job as educators, I mean, we're not making widgets, right? We're in the people business. We take a little person and we make them a better little person in 9 months. And if we never lose sight of the fact that we're about people, that makes such a difference. But then you need to let those people know that you see them, that you hear them, that you value them, that you trust them. And you can do it in so many different ways. First and foremost is just, how do you show up every day? You know, when my school had that really toxic culture, I showed up first thing in the morning, grabbed my coffee, headed out in the hallway, and I could probably get 2 or 3 discipline referrals before the day even started, you know, if I was out looking for negative things. After my 2 roads moment, I started showing up at the front door. I just stood at the front door and said hi and greeted kids and greeted parents and greeted bus drivers. I mean, and staff members. Why shouldn't I? 90% of all of them came in the front door every single day. Why shouldn't I be at the front door? It's the same thing in the classroom. You know, as a classroom teacher, be at your door. And not because your administrator said so, but because every one of your kids is going to walk in that front door. You're going to know more about what's going on with that kid just by that little interaction when they walk in your door than you can tell when they're sitting at their desk. So I think just showing up, knowing that we can control the energy we decide to bring every day. We can't control much, but boy, we can sure choose how we show up. That's one of the things we can control. I think welcoming your community in as many different creative ways as you could think of. People ask me all the time, Darrin, what can I do to increase parent engagement? How do I get parents more involved? Well, think outside the box. And again, as an administrator, just say yes. I had a teacher come to me one time and he said, hey, I've got an idea for our homecoming football game. And he wasn't a student council rep or anything like that. It was just one of my classroom teachers. He's like, hey, I got this idea. He rides a Harley. He's like, I'm part of a Harley riders group. They're a bunch of doctors and lawyers and dentists and that kind of thing. I mean, don't get the wrong idea. I'm not bringing Hell's Angels here, but what if we just invite them to bring their Harleys to homecoming? And that's how it started. It's like Harleys at homecoming. And it ended up being, we had like 120 Harley Davidsons show up for the homecoming game. They surrounded the track as the teams were running on the field, revving their engines. The last Harley that came in had a rider on the back, a big American flag. That person had the microphone. They jumped off and sang the national anthem. I mean, the place went nuts. And holy cow. But all these people who typically didn't come to our games came to a game because of that. But they kept coming back because they were invited, because we did something unique to meet them where they were. And I think that's one of the disconnects sometimes with our community. High school, I had an advantage, but man, getting your business partners involved, every high school should have 100 business partners. I don't care how big your community is, how small you should have 100 business partners, because there's so many things that are happening in your community. And one, as a business owner, it makes sense to get connected to your schools. But also as a school, man, you get those business partners involved, whether for us with our career academies, having all these businesses that were involved in energy and natural resources, law enforcement, first responders, everybody in the healthcare industry, our community college, they were in our school all the time. And so part of, I think, that rebirth of our image as a school was we had all these people in our school. And so when we were out and about in the community or in the public, if somebody said anything negative about our school, they're like, no, 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 hold on. That's not true. Here's what's true about that school. I mean, the more you get people inside your walls, the more they'll tell what's happening outside your walls. And again, just think outside the box and just try things. I had somebody come from the Downtown Coalition one time, and he's like, hey, I'd love to do something to help kick off your school year. Our school was basically in downtown. It was about a 3-minute walk down the hill. We ended up creating something we called the Tiger Town Bash. Every fall activity met in the parking lot. The marching band led us into downtown. We had a massive rally in downtown, but all of our downtown businesses were a part of that. And it became this huge tradition. And it was a lot of fun. And most importantly, it's something our kids would never forget. Getting to march down the street. They weren't in the parade. This was for the Tiger Town Bash. We're going down into downtown, and they're going to close off the street, and we're going to have this big street fair, and it's all about our kids. And I think the more you just listen, there are so many great ideas out there. You just got to be willing to listen.
So if you could go back in time, what's one piece of leadership advice that you would give yourself?
Whew, that is a really great question. Okay, here's what I think I would tell myself. Again, I told you when we started off with this, I'm not overly proud of the guy I was the first year as an assistant principal. So I would probably go back and tell myself on day one, hey, just remember, this isn't about you. This is about them. Don't forget you're in a people business. And the more you lean into people, the more you focus on building relationships, the more you let other people know that you see, hear, value, and trust them, the more successful you're going to be. And that would probably save me a year or two of heartache, that's for sure.
Well, before we wrap up, if listeners could take away just one thing from our conversation, either a mindset shift or an action that could transform their leadership, what should it be?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say this. Number one, be really clear about what you care about. Again, you're in a people-driven business, so, really lean in and care about the relationships and that type of thing. But the more you can be clear about what you really, really care about, and then the more you can align what you're doing, be intentional with your time, be intentional with your communication, be intentional with your actions, align that to the things that you really care about. To me, that's the key for success in leadership.
Dr. Peppard, I can't tell you how wonderful this conversation is for me. There's so many actionable strategies, so many stories that are really going to help transform the way they teach and lead. Thank you so much for sharing those with us.
Riley, I appreciate it so much. Thank you.
So for those who want to dive deeper into your work, learn more about Road to Awesome, or even bring you in for coaching or keynote speaking, where can they find you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, on social media, everywhere on social media, I'm Darrin M. Peppard. The website is roadtoawesome.net, and you can email me, darrin@roadtoawesome.net. Hit me on any social media, you can send me a DM, and on our website, literally every page has a pop-up that gives you an opportunity to contact us. I will tell you that I love so very much working with leaders and having the opportunity to pour into them. I referenced it, we didn't talk about it much, but my coach really helped transform me as a leader. And I just love being able to pay that forward with every leader that I work with so that, they can genuinely feel like they're really leading in their school and walking in their purpose as opposed to just running around putting out fires. So yeah, those are the best ways to get a hold of me.
And you also have a new program about to launch called the Principal Academy, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the principalacademy.com is our new digital course. There are 2 digital courses that are available there right now. We will have more courses coming when we get into the summer of 2025. Again, just designed to help leaders just really get clear and take some control of their leadership. Man, so often as leaders, we just become victim of the time bandits, and people are stealing our time all the time. Leaders, you can change that, and that's what that work at theprincipalacademy.com is all about.
Thank you again. So, to our listeners, that wraps up another episode of Innovating Education. If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure to subscribe, leave us a review, and share this with other educators and leaders. Until next time, let's keep innovating education together.